You're tuned in to the Reality Fred podcast. Food and travel, cool stuff, weird stuff, entertainment, and more. You made the choice to be here, and my friend, you've chosen wisely. Now buckle up, because it's time to get started. It's time for the Reality Fred podcast.
When you're by yourself or when the world slows down, Reality Fred. When life decides to give you the run around, Reality Fred. Or when your glass is full and your cigar is just right. Fire up the podcast that keeps you up all night. Reality Fred, I'll say it again. Reality Fred, always there like a friend. You know it's time, so just press play. Reality Fred, come and take me away.
And welcome back, Reality Fred podcast listeners. I believe this is episode 13 now, and we are still within our Halloween 2017 portion of our episodes. What we're currently doing is we kind of started this mid-September, and what we're doing is each week between now and the end of October, we're doing a podcast about a topic that is has a spooky element to it to go along with our Halloween 2017 theme. And today's theme is very interesting. It's demonology. And the story behind tonight's episode that we're putting out, back when I went to college, I had a pretty unique job, which was digging graves. And I went to St. Vincent College, and my work-study position there is I dug graves. I did that for 4 years, so I was a grave digger. I have that in my past. It was actually one of the best jobs I ever had. Just get to be outside. Most of it is just, cutting grass, maintaining the cemetery, but of course there is the occasional grave digging. But you're working, getting up every day and going to work with a group of friends, and you're just in your work boots, your t-shirt and jeans, cutting grass, digging graves, just having a good time. And to do that during your college years, it's a lot of fun. And during that time, one of my fellow grave diggers, very, 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 very interesting guy by the name of Stan. And Stan would, of course, go on. He's now a professor at the University of Virginia. And I kind of caught wind a couple months ago, just started seeing stuff floating around on Facebook about a unique class that he teaches down at the University of Virginia called Dracula. And so when I realized that I was going to be doing this Halloween theme here for several weeks, I reached out to Stan and asked him if he'd be willing to join me for a podcast, and he said yes. So I wanted to do a little bit of background on some of the things that Stan has researched and written, and I found a paper that he had, or an essay he had published about demonology. And essentially the take is, and I'll get into, when we do the interview with Stan, we'll talk a little bit more about what exactly demonology is, but essentially his paper about demonology is really just how the term demonology and our concept of what demonology is we've kind of got it all wrong. It just gets misused. When we think a demonologist, we're prone to think of like a demon hunter in shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, and that's really just the wrong perception. Demonology should be viewed more as a study, and a demonologist should be a person who objectively studies the mythology of different demons. Dr. Stanley Stepanic was a fantastic interviewee. I really enjoyed just shutting up and letting him talk. He was incredibly interesting to listen to, and especially on this topic, to hear about his Dracula class and demonology in general. And then I loved the way he actually naturally wrapped it up. I had a few more questions, but I just cut it short because the way he answered my final question was just a beautiful, natural ending that I thought, so we kind of cut it there. So without further delay, we're going to go ahead now and cut over to the interview that I just did a few hours ago with Dr. Stanley Stepanic of the University of Virginia. And what I want to do, because I think it's fantastic, let me grab here real quick. I got it laying on the floor. Give me 1 second. I printed out his online bio from the University of Virginia's website, which is fantastic. So I wanted to read his official bio. Stanley Stepanic received his Ph.D. in the fall of 2012 in Slavic studies. His professional areas of interest include general demonology, Slavic demonology, folklore, and the Russian language. His personal interests include weightlifting, video game collecting, retro gaming, music, and vintage science fiction paperback collecting. He lives with his wife in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he teaches a popular course on vampires at the University of Virginia. And so, without further delay, let's go ahead and hop right into the interview with Dr. Stanley Stepanic of the University of Virginia about Dracula and demonology. All right, and I am now officially joined here with my longtime friend, and it's a pleasure to be chatting with Dr. now Stanley Stepanic. And Stan, if you don't mind, we haven't seen each other in a while, since 2005, since we worked in the graveyard digging graves together. Catch me up a little bit. So what have you been doing since then? How did you wind up at the University of Virginia, and how did you wind up with this interesting Dracula class that you teach?
Okay, so 2005, last time I saw you, I can't remember for sure if I had applied to grad schools yet. Interestingly, my original intention was always to work for the government in some capacity, especially the FBI. I wanted to be a federal agent. I had been thinking about that for a while when I finished my 4-year degree at St. Vincent's, but without any sort of work experience, my double BA in philosophy and art history, suffice to say, wasn't what they were looking for. So, I love the degrees and all, but so that's why I lived in Russia for a little while there, and I had studied the language. But they expected more, so I had some work experience working in mental health and mental retardation before I saw you in 2005. So basically I decided to redirect because of an illness that I started to get at that time, which I didn't even understand yet, and applied to grad schools. I didn't apply to many. It was like 3, and the school I got into was UVA, so I decided to come down here to Charlottesville to finish my degree and then work from there. My original intention was to work towards a PhD, but if I happened to get a job with the government by the time I got the master's, I was planning on just moving on from there. FBI typically expects you to have like a master's. Most of those jobs do, unless you have some sort of skill like pilot license or something. They usually want you to have an advanced degree. So I was taking Russian the whole time and teaching it occasionally here at UVA. And I'll go back to the Dracula class thing a little bit later. But so I was teaching Russian and taking Russian courses. And got my master's in, 2008, I don't remember the year anymore. But at that point, whenever I got the master's, or right around then, I applied to tons of linguist jobs in the government. And as soon as the FBI saw that I had a master's in Russian, they jumped on me immediately. The previous time when I applied, they were like, they get this typical form letter months and months later. But this, they were like, boom, they're right on me because they needed Russian speakers. Because most of those people go to CIA. So, and I applied to them too, by the way. So I had to go through their processing. I passed their first psychological test. Then for me, since it was Russian, I had to do all these Russian tests, and those were difficult. I would love to talk about that, but it's outside the scope of this interview, although it's a hilarious story. So I did those tests there, passed those. Then I had what the FBI calls phase 2. It's partially a test of your logical reasoning capacity, and it also sort of works like a psychological test too, where basically the last part of the test, depending on when you take it, is you sit in a room with like 4 agents and they just like drill you, and sometimes they pull out these really weird questions. You're like, what the hell are you asking me? So I passed that, and then came the medical exam and the polygraph, and the background check was starting. And right at that time, so we're talking that was roughly 7 years of processing there. We're talking like from about 2006 or so up to about 2011. Well, I guess it's like 5 years of processing or so. So it takes a long time. It's typically how it is. It depends on their funding and stuff. So right at the time when I'm almost done with processing, I was set up to take a second polygraph exam, and I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And so I found out after 7 years what I had, and that's a disqualification. So I was like, oh man. And at that point, I had been directing all my energy towards Russian and getting better at it so that my skills would be good enough to be accepted by the government. I applied to NSA. I was being processed by them. I was being processed by a couple different different entities, I guess you could say. FBI was just the one that was really moving towards like actual employment. I was almost there. So because of that, I had to completely, change my direction because I couldn't become an officer in the military. Nothing like that was going to be possible anymore because it's disqualification, like I said, to have any form of inflammatory bowel disease for most of that stuff. Well, a lot of it, I guess. So at that point, what had happened is I had originally been the TA for the course called Dracula here at UVA. The original instructor, he's still alive. His name is Dr. Jan Berkowski. He retired in 2007, I believe. And when that happened, the Slavic department, that was their biggest course. It had the most enrollments, and they wanted to keep it because enrollment numbers make money for any department at school, anywhere in the United States, especially smaller departments. So they said, you want to take this class over it. So I hadn't been done with the FBI at that point. So this is back in 2007, as I said. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. But I didn't like how the original instructor taught it. I wanted to do completely different. So I told them I'm going to rebuild this course ground up. Like, there's going to be basically nothing here that original course was, except the name, and that's really going to be it. And so the chair of the department's like, go ahead, whatever you want to do.
At that point, it's either someone's going to teach it or not at all, so you might as well let you do it the way you want to do it.
At that point, exactly, yeah. So I just rebuilt it. I basically just sat down it took me several months, and we're talking like 6 to 8 hours sometimes, the amount of time I put into some of these lectures, and getting materials and researching and making sure to check articles and books. Can't rely on the internet. The internet's a wonderful thing. That's the problem today, is that people think you can figure out anything you want any second with sites like Wikipedia, but total crap. So you guys spend a lot of time digging around, making sure what you're about to say in that lecture is going to be correct, because you'll be called out on it if someone figures it out. So I'll make sure I looked absolutely professional and totally knew what I was talking about. And, I had interest in vampires and things like that for a long time, but the amount of research I did of this was way more than I'd ever done, even though I knew a lot already. So, rebuilt the course. I think the first semester that I did it was spring of 2007, so it was after he had retired. It may have been the fall of 2007. It may have been that, actually. I can't really remember when he retired exactly. But at some point in 2007, I took it over, and I think I had 25 students for the first time I did it, and then there was so much interest, I increased it to 30, and then they're like, the wait list starts. So you get wait lists if you have, so most of the course caps are at 30 students for one instructor, so started to get this, wait list that was building up, and I was like, oh man, I wish I could let some more of these students in there. So that just isn't, I don't even remember why we did this, but it was like in 2009 or 10 maybe, and they're just like, let's just do one class of 150 kids. Could you, if we gave you somebody to grade them? I think the reason we decided is because somebody needed a little extra job, but they weren't a full-time student in the graduate department or graduate anymore in Slavic studies. So I was like, sure, they can grade the papers or something or help me out. I don't know. So we just shot for it then, and the class was 150 students, and it did well. So then we became 2 separate sections of the same class, and now it's 3 with 75 students per section, which I'll probably be increasing over the next 2 years or so to even more students. So I assume when we talk about the class itself now, is that more background or is that enough?
Yeah, and obviously this is all fascinating to hear how popular it is, especially hearing the numbers and how many students were on waiting lists and interested in the course. And of course, when I first approached you about doing this, you told me, you said just look up the stuff online, you'll see. So I looked into what you were doing online, and of course, Rate My Professor, things like that. Obviously, everybody loves the course. Yeah. It's pretty popular online, everything like that, but I don't, obviously, other than the name Dracula, I have no idea what the course is about. So I'd love to hear, I'm sure there's some deeper meaning to the course. I'm sure you're trying to embed, have the students learn quite a bit. So what is the course about, and what is it that that you hope that, of course, if the students that pay attention and do will take away from the class?
Sure. So yeah, that's the thing about the course is, did you see the little documentary that I put on my Facebook page? I don't remember if you saw that. That one company did about me in the course.
No, I have not seen that. I'll have to get that from you after this.
So, I've been doing some consulting work for this company called Course Hero to sort of build more of an online presence. I'm getting more into non-traditional publishing as opposed to journals right now, so it's just kind of a little unique avenue to try. They did a micro-documentary about me where I talk about some of these things. It's really professionally done. It's on my page. You can check it out later. It's not important now. So what I talk about in there is the same thing I'm going to tell you right now. It's that when people hear the Course of Dracula, when I'm out in the world there and people ask me, what do you do? And I say, teach